in those control decks, there are a lot of variation between them, how many Snorlaxes they have, whether they have Charizard as well. So it'll be interesting to see what Ian has in store for us. And on the other side of the table, we have Lugia V-Star, a deck we haven't seen too much of so far.
No, it's sort of fallen off in favor a little bit due to a few pieces sort of leaving the rotation, things that people have wanted to have a little longer. Of course, Charizard being a strong deck, but it's gained a lot as well. If you look at the prize cards there, two cards you really don't want to see in combination with each other. Well, that Hisuian Heavy Ball single copy and the Entei V, that was really a card that came to the top of my mind as maybe a way that Ian can sort of claw back into this matchup, which really, when you look at it on paper, Lugia V-Star has so much going for it against these control decks.
Yeah, between the Jet Energies, the Arceus being able to attach everywhere, and also being a good attacker, right? Mimikyu does stop Lugia V-Star, but Arceus can handle that, so it's not like you can trap that in the active. Now, we do have the match starting with Ian going first, and a Luminion, possibly the worst starter of them all for Brandon.
Yeah, that completely almost offsets Ian prizing that Hisuian Heavy Ball and the Entei V. That Luminion, without having anything like a water energy in the deck for Brandon to use that Aqua Return attack, it's going to be stuck there unless something like a Collapse Stadium comes down and discards it. Not what you want to see at all, especially in a matchup where Ian's win condition is going after these Pokemon that cannot attack, slowly running Brandon out of resources, and putting the tempo into his favor.
Yep, and in order to do that, he does have the option to use Snorlax or Mawile in order to trap that Luminion in the active, so it's going to be on Brandon to hopefully get that out of the field. And with 4 Jet Energy, I do believe he will be able to do so. Now, I don't see any Temple of Sinnoh in Ian's list, so nothing's going to stop those Jet Energies from working.
It does have a plethora of attackers to choose from, so like we sort of mentioned yesterday with some of the control decks that we featured, sometimes the best way to remove energies is to just knock those Pokemon out. Those Pokemon and all cards attached to it do go to the discard pile. And with Lugia just playing lots of energy cards, sometimes it's really just going to come down to getting those attacking threats off the board, but it's easier said than done, Pablo. Brandon's got a lot going for him so far. Starting off with this Ultra Ball, Archeops #1, the first piece of the puzzle. It's all thanks to that Summoning Star V-Star power from Lugia V-Star, allowing you to put 2 colorless non-rule box Pokemon into play, and Primal Turbo, such a powerful ability. By normal effects, it's sort of checked by being on a restored Pokemon, a Pokemon that's really hard to get into play, but Lugia just throws all the logic out the window and gets it into play that easy.
Yeah, that's one way to get a Stage 2 Pokemon into play, which usually is deemed very hard, right? Especially these restored Pokemon that you mentioned, but Lugia V-Star just bypassing that rule for over a year now, and with a lot of success. Now we're going to see that Call for Family to help establish that Lugia. Very nice attack for this Minccino, getting another one out as well. Now Brandon needs to make sure that he's very smart with his energy and doesn't spread himself a little too thin. And wow.
That is a great 6 cards here for Ian. Immediately going into tank, but not after playing Rare Candy, getting Pidgeot EX into play. And this is the crucial turns for Ian. Before Brandon has got these Archeops into play, before he's firing off huge attacks with that Cinccino's special roll attack, Ian's got to figure out how he wants to navigate these turns, what Pokemon he wants to set up. It's really hard to deal with that Cinccino. Not only does it deal incredibly high damage, but it's a one-prize Pokemon doing so, so you can't wall it out with things like Mimikyu. All of your wall threats, things with Hero's Cape or not Big Charm, the Bravery Charm on it, are going to really just get knocked out, mowed down by this Cinccino. So how does Ian really want to approach this first turn to really make sure that no matter what Brandon is able to put together, if he just has the nuts next turn, right? The Lugia V-Star, double Archeops, Cinccino, that he can still keep himself in a spot where he doesn't just get snowballed out of control.
I mean, generally, other than trapping the Luminion, it's going to be really hard to slow down Lugia, right? They have access to energy from their deck. There's no more Sydney to attack your opponent's hand. That card rotated, so it's just going to be quite difficult for Ian to really stop that once setting up, once Brandon has fully set up. Now, is there any way you can disrupt that? You can try maybe to area away the Ultra Balls to make it a little harder to discard those Arceus, but that feels like a stretch.
It does feel very difficult, but there is that Hero's Cape with the Arven found off the quick search. We're just going to see another Pidgey coming into play, so Ian may be understanding there is a very reasonable world where throughout the game, my Pidgeot EX could fall. I'm going to want to have another one as a backup to get set up, and also finding that Cleffa card that we haven't really seen too lot of these control decks, but as of recent, it's really found a home here just as a way to act as a better Rotom in a lot of cases. And hold on here, Ian just wanting to get this Pokemon into play, protecting this Pidgeot EX with the Hero's Cape, and getting in there using Blustery Wind to take the knockout onto that Minccino. This is Ian's way of saying, look, you're on a clock here. If you kind of leave your Pokemon unevolved, if you're not really attacking me, I'm just going to start knocking out your Minccino so that they can't evolve and deal big damage to me later on.
Yeah, I guess that is one way you can help contain the Minccino or Cinccino threat is taking them down, right? You know Lugia usually doesn't play any way to recover Pokemon outside of the V-Star ability. Therefore, if there's no Cinccino, then how are you getting past that Mimikyu? You have to use Archeops, which is still a good enough answer, but it's not as great against other things that can tank those hits. So maybe this is what Ian is planning, just denying the Cinccino altogether.
This is a big turn here for Brandon. This Pidgeot EX will be a tough Pokemon to get knocked out, especially with this Lugia V coming up into the active spot, thanks to that Hero's Cape A-Spec, giving Pidgeot EX 100 more HP. We're going to see the gift energy attached to Lugia, and I'm actually not sure there's a lot much more going on in this hand. We actually might just see this evolve and then read the wind to discard that Archeops that was grabbed, and this is what Ian needs in this spot. A little bit more time, a little bit more tempo, and with just one Cinccino into play, Pablo, is this the opportunity where Ian can boss? And a huge find there off the prizes, finds that heavy ball, and can get the NTV out of the prizes.
Yeah, the NTV can provide a little bit more aggression as opposed to the 100 damage that Pidgeot is doing right now with that double turbo attached. The Entei definitely threatens the Cinccino, which we know is the key Pokemon for Brandon. And one important thing here to consider is that Brandon did prize 2 Lugia V-Stars, right? So finding that last copy, even though there's Ultra Balls, is not going to be easy at all.
Now only has things like Jock to maybe search out for evolution cards, but with how Brandon's been playing, already has that Lumineon in play and is just playing that one copy. So, like you mentioned, Pablo, it's going to be very hard to get that ability up and running, get Summoning Star into play. Just going to see NTV hit the board, a Fire Energy goes onto it. And Ian, every turn from here on out, as long as Pidgeot EX is in play, will be able to put together whatever pieces he would like, thanks to that quick search ability. Search out for any card. We see Ian already with the boss's orders, and usually Blustery Wind does 120 damage, but because of that reduction from Double Turbo, it's just 10 damage short of knocking out Cinccino, which seems like it would be a great play. In this case, though, Ian's maybe got to think, do I take a turn off? Do I preserve this Pidgeot? There's a lot of decisions to consider in this spot.
Yeah, I mean, committing so many energy to one KO Pidgeot is not going to be easy, and we're going to see that Airy, oh wow, off the Read the Wind. Brandon found the raw Lugia V-Star, the last copy in the deck. Odds were definitely not for that to happen, but it's there, right? And nothing's going to stop this Lugia V-Star from summoning the 2 Archeops next turn.
And now Ian has some hand information as well. Saw the Lugia V-Star was there and also has an Iono, but there's also no Gusting cards in the hand for Brandon. So unless he top decks something like a Boss's Orders, he is going to really have to, if he wants to start taking prizes, knock out a Pokemon like Cleffa, which is not going to provide a lot of value for Ian down the line. But there we go. We're going to see Summoning Star put 2 of these Archeops into play. Double Primal Turbo on board and online. We've got to keep track of some of these resources here, though. We do see 1 Jet Energy down. That Collapse Stadium is still available. So while we have been seeing Ian so far go aggressive, that Lumineon, it's got to still be a blinking red light in your head here if you're Brandon saying, this guy, this Pokemon has to leave as soon as possible, because if he stays here for too long, if I continue to just mow through my resources, it is going to be a potential lose condition for me in this game.
Yeah, the Lumineon making sure that stays in play and then eventually gets trapped is definitely Ian's goal right now. And part of how you can do that is if you end up knocking out this Cinccino at some point next turn with your Entei, right? You only need 1 energy and the boss's orders to do so. That's less Pokemon that Brandon will have in play and less energy as well because of the ones we're attaching right now to potentially get rid of the Lumineon with that Collapse Stadium. So I feel like I'm seeing Pidgeot control, but also Pidgeot Entei aggro control.
And with this missed energy, Brandon has now burnt through half of his energy cards in the deck. Got to keep track of that. Does have a way to disrupt Ian's hand a little bit. Usually control going to get pretty sizable hands still off of the Iono, but it will just be 5 cards for Ian because that prize card was taken. That Boss's Orders going to the bottom of his deck. He is only just playing a single copy of Boss. That's all the copies Ian has, so we need to find something like the energy card here to make things happen, as we'll see Brandon just play more of these resources out, capturing Aroma. That can find an evolution Pokemon, and it will be another Chinchino. More resources to keep track of. That Minchino, though, this is the second one so far powered up. Every time it gets knocked out, energies go away. There's no way to bring those back. It's going to be a big resource war as this game progresses.
Yep, and that 110 HP coming in so clutch to prevent from going down from that Pidgeot the previous turn, but not going to be enough for the Entei. We do see the bench now completely full, so Collapse Stadium is a card that Brandon really wants to get that Luminion off the bench. Now, I did see Ian found the fire off of that Iono, so can now quick search for that boss and eliminate the Cinchino and 3 energies alongside it. Is that the best play? I think so.
So we got to do math here. Now, I think this would be a lot more enticing if you had something like a Bravery Charm to boost this Entei's HP up a little bit. That means that this Chinchino would need, if another one came into play, would need 4 energy cards that aren't double turbo energy. Double turbo would push it out of the math since it would be at 280 HP. And this is a smart sequencing choice here for Ian. Just wants to use that fleet-footed ability, a little bit of a bonus this Entei V has, and then use Quick Search to see what cards can be potentially grabbed, and immediately, no consideration here for Ian, just gonna immediately grab that boss's orders, put it into the hand. Ian will start to get on the aggressive even more, go down to 4 prize cards and say, look, every time you try and power up these Chinchinos throughout the game, I'm going to be ready. And the more prizes you take, the more Pokemon like Radiant Charizard become imminent threats to deal with.
Yeah, that Radiant Charizard, another thing that Brandon needs to be aware of. So we're seeing these control decks be more and more aggressive, and we talked about it yesterday, right? A way you can control your opponent's resources is just by eliminating them through knockouts, and that's exactly what we're seeing Ian do here. No need to play Temple of Sinnoh, no need to play any other Lugia attacks. Just go after your opponent's attackers, eliminate their energies that way, and this is where we're going to see the Cinchino go down.
So Brandon is slowly losing these Chinchino and some of these energy cards. There's now 2 Chinchino in the discard pile, so this will just be 1 more left if it wants to get evolved. No way to recover Pokemon. That Summoning Star could be used to bring Chinchino back, but it's already been used on double Archeops, and there's always a question when you're playing against these control decks where you don't necessarily need to use double Archeops every turn, but in a case where Brandon only put 1 into play, that boss's orders from Ian would have 100% targeted just that 1 Archeops.
For sure. Limiting your opponent's energies down to 1 per turn is so important if you have that opportunity. Fortunately, there are 2. Now, we do see the second Cinchino hit the board, and Brandon had a tough choice to make after drawing from that gift energy, but seems like he's going to fully commit to this Cinchino, and we'll go down to 4 prizes. So the Radiant Charizard is a threat still with the Magma Basin. I do believe Ian is playing a copy of that. So Magma Basin plus double turbo will get the knockout, and then there's no more Cinchinos in the game, along with very few energies left.
And this is tough here for Brandon. I'm not sure if he has another energy card in the deck that's a non-double turbo energy. Let's take another look and see. Even something like these Jet Energy, you really don't want to be putting them down onto this Chinchino, and I think we're just going to actually, this is fine, the more that I look about it. The math actually does not matter if you put the double turbo into play. I was thinking with Bravery Charm, but I think Ian smartly decided to not attach it because he understands it probably would not matter on this Entei. A big heads-up play from Ian, really seeing what makes sense here for Brandon on his side.
Yep, this will be enough. 260 damage onto that Entei, getting the knockout. But yeah, this is the last Cinchino. That Radiant Charizard with the Magma Basin with a double turbo can be a big threat.
If Brandon could have played another Iono that turn, that would have been a big opportunity. Limit Ian's hand size, and you can only quick search for 1 of those cards. That could be something he's got to think about. You do already know that these control decks are usually playing anywhere from 2 to 3 copies of that double turbo energy, usually not maxing out at the 4. And with 1 already being on that Pidgeot, you've always got to be careful of considerations of how things can go well for you and how they could go bad. And there is a world where potentially that Pidgeot EX has the only double turbo energy in the deck attached to it.
Yep, there is definitely that possibility. Now, we do have the deck list, and there are 2 copies available. So as long as that hasn't been priced, which I don't think it was, there will be the possibility to get this knockout. Now, does he have 1 of the pieces, though? He can quick search for 1, but does he already have the other one? I don't think he does.
Not quite sure. It looks like just a few counter catcher in the hand. Thinking about what the next step is to play in this situation. He understands there's some liabilities on the board. That Rotom V only having 190 HP means even something like that Lugia V-Star's Tempest Dive attack could finish it off if it comes to that. And Pablo, we haven't even noted the most important card thanks to the Temporal Forces expansion, A-Spec cards. Lots of times for this Lugia deck, it's Master Ball, but Brendan has actually chose to play the Prime Catcher A-Spec. That is a huge swing card, especially if you've already set up your Archeops and put them into play.
Yep, it's basically an extra jet energy, right? That switching effect so crucial. So perhaps that Luminion is not as big of a liability in this spot as it normally would be, right? If there was a Master Ball A-Spec or even a Maximum Belt. But it's going to be on Ian to try to piece this knockout out. Otherwise, Brandon, this Inchino can't take down anything in play other than the Pidgeot. And if my math doesn't fail me, there's 12 energy in play, so there should be at 5 left for Brandon outside of the prizes to be able to even stretch for the knockout of the Pidgeot if he needs to at some point.
This is a cool play Ian is going for here, using Luminion and grabbing Thornton to be able to switch one of these Pokemon from the discard pile with another Pokemon. And if there is something like a Magma Basin here potentially, then that could be what Ian needs to maybe put this Entei V back into play. I'm not quite sure the resources are quite there, so let's see what Ian has in mind. He's going to use this to get Entei V into play. Oh, there is a Magma Basin. Wow.
Oh, wow.
Ian has it here. He can use this Thornton to protect this Rotom, get it out of the active spot here, use Fleet-Footed, draw some more cards. Does he have that mist energy? And it is there. Entei V, even after being knocked, can just be put right back into play. And because of the double turbo energy on that Lugia V-Star, even though you're putting 2 damage counters with the Magma Basin, that Tempest Dive will not be knocking out this Entei V. Ian going down to 3 prize cards, and now we've seen all 3 Chinchino hit the discard pile here for Brandon.
What a fantastic play here by Ian. That Thornton really caught me off guard for sure. And maybe the double turbo wasn't the price, and that's why Ian had to go through this process of getting the Entei into play instead of just using the Radiant Charizard. However, wouldn't the Magma Basin plus the energy, because Brandon is at 3 prizes, still work on the Radiant Charizard? So I'm guessing Ian just wanted to make sure that he could continually attack each turn with the Entei and not have the liability of Radiant Charizard in the active spot.
Well, again, going back to that math point, if Brandon's best attack for turn is just to use Tempest Dive, then Ian can quick search out something like a Penny and then just get an extra turn of attack. So I think Ian would rather have gone through the extra hoops here to just deny a prize card, because that Luminion still will be a liability later down the game if you give your opponent another single prize knockout.
Yeah, now with the Bravery Charm, though, it's, as you said, out of range because of this double turbo. It is reducing by 20 the damage that Lugia V-Star is doing. So 200 is not enough to KO this Entei. 200 is not enough to KO this Luminion. We know there's no Lost Vacuum. I know Ian knows that in general, no Lugia V-Star has been playing Lost Vacuum, right? And that's something very important to try to use that prior information and bring it into the tournament, right? The metagame trends, the list trends, and the card counts from previous tournaments.
Brandon is sitting on that Prime Catcher and thinking, is now the time to use that? Is now the time to give that information away, show that Prime Catcher's in this deck? And it's actually going to be going after the Luminion, but again, because of the double turbo energy math, it's not going to be a knockout. So this really makes me think, what is Brandon going for in this spot? He's going to use the Primal Turbo. And you can power up some of these other Pokemon in play. There's nothing crazy like Weirdeer plus Jet Energy. There is that Mew EX in the deck. That's something Brandon hasn't shown yet, but there's really not great attacks to copy. Even something like copying the Burning Rondo on the Entei will not knock it out either.
I think Brandon's going to go ahead and retreat the double turbo and then manually attach the Jet Energy to bring the Lugia back up. And now he will be doing 220 damage, putting himself at 1 prize card remaining and a single boss's orders, being able to take down either of these 2 Pokemon on the bench or the Entei as well. So can Brandon survive this turn? Because this Radiant Charizard, if there is a Defiance spend, would be able to knock out the Lugia V-Star.
And the big question is, does Brandon have 3 energy cards left in the deck? This Radiant Charizard could take this knockout on the Lugia V-Star, but Brandon could respond with that Snorlax on the bench. So it's going to come down to what resources Brandon has left. No energy cards in the prize cards here, so is not going to be receiving really any help to pretty much useless cards. Brandon going down to 1 prize card, and Pablo, we have officially entered the end game. Also using that Tempest Dive to discard the Magma Basin, so it will be on Ian to have a copy of the Fire Energy, which there is just that 1 copy remaining in the discard pile. Ian would have to find a big combination here, something like Super Rod to put it back, plus a way to search it out, and Defiance Band. Let's see what Ian's got with this hand.
Yeah, Ian is playing that Defiance Band, so the KO is possible, but yeah, Pidgeot is good, but is it that good? Oh, the Defiance Band is actually prized, so there's no access to that. There's no way to knock out Lugia V-Star this turn.
So Ian's got to get into tank here, think about what he can do in this spot. We'll finally play that Super Rod, put the Fire Energy back, and it may just be a pivot into Entei and hope my opponent does not have Boss Angle. We see Iono, the card of selection, off that Quick Search. There's no draw support on Brandon's side. You can put that big hand size down to just 1 card and force your opponent into maybe an awkward strategy. You're giving them a little bit more of an out this way, right? You do put yourself into a position where you may have to play Penny on the following turn, but I think with Ian knowing that this Defiance Band is unavailable, this may just be his second best play.
Well, but going into Entei doesn't work because of that prior 20 damage, so it might be... Okay, I thought it was going to be attack with the Pidgeot first and then go into the Entei combined with the Iono, but it seems like Ian just trying to trap this Snorlax in the active. Are there enough energies left, or is there 1 Jet Energy left for Brandon to be able to switch and get an attack off?
Yeah, it's risky, though, because you have to also have the Jet Energy and the boss potentially on the same turn if this Pidgeot just sits in the active spot, doesn't do anything. Now, there is sort of a weird situation where there's maybe a world you don't want to attack into Snorlax if they play something like Sharon Scare to potentially heal it, but this may actually just be the best attacking threat, because if Ian can evolve this Pidgey into a Pidgeot EX, then there's nothing on the bench that can really deal enough damage if Ian eventually knocks out that Lugia V-Star. So let's take a look at the energies. Looks like there is still that therapeutic energy in the deck.
There's 1 Jet Energy left as well.
There is.
Now, Ian could also chance finding the Defiance Band after knocking out the Snorlax, right, with Pidgeot to open up that potential KO with Radiant Charizard, but it's a 1 in 3 chance. We know it will be the next card, but he doesn't know that.
This is very tough. Ian does have time from here, though, so if he wants to, maybe he could make a play where he just slowly pennies every Pokemon up off of his board. That's a potential he could go for. Leaves the Pidgeot
in there as well, yeah. Has the only Pokemon available.
So now at his disposal, Quick Search every turn. Ian does have a pretty decent amount of options with the cards already in the hand. There's a Fire Energy in there that he put back into the deck off Super Rod. I believe a Penny in the hand as well. And Ian's really got to think. Has the idea that these decks are always playing for Jet Energy, so that's got to be a given.
Yeah.
You give your opponent time. They can kind of just sit here if you're not taking knockouts and you're just leaving Snorlax, where Jet Energy plus Boss's Orders, unless you clear every single Pokemon off the board, will be getting that last prize card. There's just too many options as it stands. It looks like just thinking, what do I want to grab here off of Quick Search? These are long games in a matchup like this. We're almost halfway through the way this match has played out. 23 minutes past, and we're just going to see Arven get played. And now there is the Nest Ball. Ian may be thinking his best chance could potentially be Chi-Yu getting in there and trying to spin the wheel a little bit and saying, look, I know you didn't have the energy cards. You probably would have played those down. I'm going to see if I can do what it takes to get lucky and get rid of your last few special energies in the deck.
Yeah, Chi-Yu combined with that Bravery Charm that we just saw get grabbed puts Chi-Yu exactly out of range of that Lugia V-Star damage. 230 HP would be perfect, and then Jealousy Cinch. It's like, okay, you're not going to use your Jet Energy or power up, then sure, I'll try to hit it myself. Boss.
Does find Boss. That's a great card to hit. It's not quite Jet Energy. Let's see what Brandon has for turn in his hand. Does have the Boss's Orders and finds the Jet Energy off the top. What a combination for Brandon. Ian was just 1 card away of milling the Jet Energy. A tough break for Ian, but Brandon understood what he needed to do and closed out a long game 1. Wow, what a nail biter, Pablo.
Wow, that draw of the Iono was so perfect, and then Jealousy Cinch actually got Brandon closer. I can't believe what I just saw. The odds of that happening even were so abysmally low.
You could see Ian shaking his head. He is like, come on. I did everything I could there, even after having my Entei and my Heavy Ball prized. Was there anything different I could have done? maybe some minimal things there, Pablo, but I really like the line that Ian took in that game. It felt like he understood what Brandon's win condition was able to make the Thornton play, try and play around knockouts as best as possible, but Brandon had the prime catcher the turn before when he needed to knock out the Lumineon, and then the perfect card off the top of the deck. What a game there between these two competitors.
What an amazing game. Ian's aggression in the early game almost paying off, systematically taking down the Cinchinos, the big threats, being able to use Entei in a more aggressive fashion, losing that Entei afterwards, getting it back with Thornton, and almost going away with the win. I think on average, Ian should be winning 9 out of 10 times, but Brandon just had the perfect combination.
Yeah, the boss's order is in hand. If Ian had another turn there, would have actually had information on the boss, and then eventually you can just Iona that card to the bottom of your opponent's deck and give yourself some more time. That was literally a perfect time top deck opportunity. We'll get into the second game. Our 2 Gusting cards in the top of the prizes there for Brandon, so that's got to be something you really don't love to see. That Defiance Band, yet again, unavailable for Ian. So it looks like he will be starting things off and has a great copy of that one Buddy Poffin. Can get out some of these basic Pokemon into play, start to get the board set up, and it will be double Pidgey. You know how much Ian's got to value getting Pidgeot EX set up as quickly as possible.
Yeah, getting that is, of course, the way the deck gets to work, right? So many different pieces, this 2-page deck list, so many single cards. That is how you can find them when you need them. No attachment here for Ian, so we won't be seeing any aggression from this Entei this upcoming turn, and I think that's why Ian chose to go first, to try and be as aggressive as possible, because you know time is against him at this point.
So we'll see how fast Brandon is able to get things set up. Doesn't have to play too fast, especially when you're not really threatening an attack on Ian's side the following turn. We'll get heads off of Capturing Aroma, so this could grab Archeops. You see it immediately put to the top of Brandon's deck. We'll just check the rest of the cards. I think it's really just going to come down to those same factors. How does Brandon manage those energy cards available, and how many Cinchino attacks is he able to get off before Ian maybe targets those or the Archeops in play?
Yeah, that's definitely the key to this matchup, it seems. It's not about denying those jet energies. It's really hard to do so, right? Even if you're playing 4 copies of Temple of Sinnoh, because Lugia discards those stadiums. But it seems like the aggression is the way to go here, and the denial of the Cinchinos.
So it looks like Brandon will be going back into the deck. We'll see if there's something like an Ultra Ball or just another Capturing Aroma. We'll see what this finds. It's another heads. I mean, Brandon is in a spot where even something like a turn 3 Summoning Star is fine if it means you're backing it up with solid attackers. Read the Wind combos so well with the whole strategy behind Lugia V-Star, and it makes sense that it's on that Lugia V. A great way to add some more consistency, add some cards to the hand, but more importantly, there's very few discarding effects that are available every turn consistently. Read the Wind just kind of acts like that for this deck.
Yeah, and not to mention that if Brandon doesn't bench a lot of things, the damage that Entei is doing is not as significant or threatening, right? And we do see that Morty's Conviction, the card you were talking about in the beginning, even.
Yeah, when I saw this list, I sort of asked myself some questions about how useful it really is in this Lugia deck. It's another way for you to discard cards from your hand, and it's going to work out perfectly here. Archeops number 1 will hit the discard pile off that Morty's Conviction, and number 2, discarded off Read the Wind. Brandon setting up for a turn 2 Summoning Star, exactly what you want with this Lugia V-Star deck.
That might have been the first Morty's Conviction we've seen on stream since it got released, I'm pretty sure.
It might be. I'd have to check back. I'd have to do my research a little bit. Ian, again, having turn 2 Rare Candy Pidgeot on his side, that's what you want to see. Now, something like a Burning Rondo, even just for a little bit of damage, would have been a great follow-up. But now Ian's got to think. Brandon has a lot of cards in hand, did just draw 3 cards off that Read the Wind. So what does Ian want to do here? Does he want to start powering attacks up? Does he want to maybe re-pivot into a different Pokemon? There's a lot of options to think about. Yeah,
the Entei can definitely tank a hit here. Now, we do see Ian holding an Airy in his hand, but against Lugia, though, the 2 Archeops have already hit the discard pile. Like, other than the Prime Catcher, there's not really like a very impactful item card that you can hit with Airy, right? There's no Super Rods, there's no Rare Candies, there's no Mirage Gate. So against Lugia, that might be why we are seeing Lugia at the very top. With all these control, all these Airy being played, Lugia is the best deck to combat those cards.
Yeah, you could always get lucky and hit that one Prime Catcher, of course, that Brandon's playing. That's pretty unlikely, though. So I think Ian thinking better of it, playing Arven as a supporter for choice. We'll will be Nest Ball plus that Forest Seal Stone. Quick Search already being used. Same with Fleet-Footed, and no energy card coming down again. So what is Ian cooking here? What is he looking to do by holding these cards in his hand right now?
Now, Brandon does only bench one Minccino. I feel like I would love to see him hold off on benching that until he can bench two at the same time, so that if one goes down, he still has the other one, especially if you're going to dedicate some resources to the one here. Because without Cinccino, right, you have no answer to Mimikyu. Dealing with the Entei becomes a little awkward and problematic, so having that extra turn to, or that extra needed turn to evolve, I think is so important that you really don't want to bench it until you can bench two to guarantee that you have at least one available the turn after.
So I think Brandon's just thinking, do I want to use the second Primal Turbo? Might as well just look through the deck, see what pieces you have available. There are still plenty of energy cards. We've only seen maybe one get discarded thus far. Lugia V-Star, great Pokemon to start. And will also this game, let's not forget, have access to Lumineon. That could make closing things out a lot easier, since any of your ways to search out basic Pokemon will allow you to essentially draw a supporter card. Or find a supporter card, not just draw into it.
Yeah, I mean, we do see the Serena and the Boss at the very top of the prize cards, but there are two other copies of Boss's Orders available as well, and that's probably going to be good enough. So we see the 220 hits onto this Entei, surviving by a mere 10 HP. And now it's on Ian to make something happen here against Brandon's picture-perfect setup.
And this makes sense for why Ian didn't maybe go out of his way to find a Fire Energy, because if it was attached, there's really no point in attacking with this heavily damaged Entei. So we'll see the Quick Search be used, and immediately Penny can reset Brandon's turn of damage and give Ian a little bit more time to set up, maybe start to slowly attack. I feel like Ian would actually maybe be okay allowing Brandon to have a prize card on an insignificant Pokemon, since Ian didn't have an excellent opportunity that previous game to use Counter Catcher, which he's playing 3 copies of in this deck, to have a way to gust some of these bench Pokemon while also playing these impactful Disruption or Stabilization supporter cards.
Now, Ian is eyeing up that Mimikyu to try and slow down Brandon just a little bit, force him to commit to a Cinccino, but will that be enough? I don't think so.
We're going to see the Forest Seal Stone be used right now, and Ian now at this point is thinking about, do I just grab the energy card? And it looks like that will be what it is. This makes sense if Ian's not going to want to re-promote that Entei this turn, but then the question becomes, what do you leave in the active spot? And it's just going to be Nest Ball failing, not grabbing any Pokemon, so could this be maybe Ian setting up for a Cleffa play to try and draw as many cards as possible, or some other option?
Yeah, it seems like that's going to be the choice. Make sure that you have those tools, the Defiance Best, available to you, reducing as much damage as possible to keep your Pokemon safe. It's actually going to go onto the Pidgey, which I'm surprised. But yeah, it's going to be Cleffa for 3 cards, I believe. Yep.
Yep, filling the hand up to 7 cards with that Grasping Draw attack. This action will be back on Brandon. Now that Minccino did not get punished being the solo Pokemon in play, usually I do agree, you want to get 2 down at the same time, but when there's no attacking threats, it feels like it's just okay to have it there just as a potential option. But now, what else does Brandon have access to this turn?
Did Brandon draw for turn?
I'm not sure if I watched him draw or not. Did you see it happen? Hopefully the judges will make sure they take care of it. I'm sure hopefully each player is drawing cards for turn, taking care of everything. We'll make sure the game is being played as properly possible, as Brandon will start his turn off with a Primal Turbo. Just take a look through the deck, see what energy cards are there, and deciding to not grab anything off that first Primal Turbo. Doesn't want to overcommit if this Cinccino is not being used this turn. Yeah,
not going to commit any more resources than necessary. And now Brandon taking this knockout. I think this is the ideal way you want to go against control. Like, the less cards you have to play to achieve your goal of getting closer to winning, that's the dream, right? Now, Brandon is definitely missing another Minccino, because now this opens up Counter Catcher. The Entei is 1 turn, 1 energy away to take down this. It will survive the hit from Lugia V-Star. So Ian now gonna go on the offensive here and start taking knockouts and denying the possibility for Brandon to do so as well.
Yeah, the double turbo energy means the damage reduction will not matter in this case. Still dealing enough damage to knock out Cinccino. And now the question is, what does Ian want to play as a supporter card for a turn? Has Quick Search as well. Will use that. And you see Ian playing just a little bit quicker. Understands time is not on his side. There's just 16 minutes remaining in this round. If at best Ian can force a tie out, this is definitely one of the matchups that you're okay doing that against. But these games are going to get a little bit longer, especially with Brandon having a lot on board. Ian's got to still play with caution and a little bit of pep in his step.
Now, if Brandon ends up winning this, he's going to have 37 match points with 2 rounds to go. So basically, he's going to have the possibility to decide what he's up against in top card almost. So really nice position to be in if you are Brandon, as we do see Ian going in this aggressive route, going after the Cinchino, taking the his first KO, and we'll have to see what ends up happening here. And can Ian take 5 more prize cards within the next 15 minutes?
Ian got some great information there as well. Saw there was no boss's orders, no Iono in the hand, so Brandon's response, even after that gift energy drawing, maybe a card at most, is not going to be very, very strong unless he found some other pieces at this point. So we're going to see that Great Ball get played. Players will be just drawing some more cards. Brandon using that Great Ball to look at the top 7 cards. Really just looking to get down a few more of those Minccino. Is playing maximum 4 copies and does find one of those off the Great Ball.
Yep, there's a Minccino getting benched. Once again, ideally you would like to see 2 in play at once, but you can't always do what you want here now. Getting this hit into the Entei will force it to like, okay, you go after my Minccino, then you can't penny, right? Because we are going to be tight in prizes, therefore Counter Catcher will not be working yet.
And Brandon's in a tough spot too. There are a lot of energy cards in the hand. If you want to play something like Professor's Research to maybe see another Minccino this turn, you've got to ask yourself, is it worth discarding 3, maybe 4 energy cards for the turn? Brandon's thinking about it. Did top deck the boss's orders for turn, so does have access to that card and is going to actually just go after the Pidgey. This is a really interesting line. Is it worth taking this prize card to put yourself back in Counter Catcher range again?
I mean, I'm honestly not so sure. I think the Entei is a big Pokemon that you really want to take care of, right? Pressure, especially because Ian can't just go quick search boss, take a knock at your Minccino, and then you can't deal with the Entei right away, right? I even would have liked to see a knockout on the Radiant Charizard a little bit more than the Pidgey, just because Radiant Charizard, as the game develops, is going to be a much bigger threat overall.
Yeah, and Ian actually going to grab double Turbo Energy, valuing just getting an attachment down onto something even like this Radiant Charizard, so that if you play Penny the following turn, since Brandon has taken 2 prize cards, you're getting closer and closer to Combustion Blast being a valid attacking option, as Arvin will be the supporter card for turn, grabbing the Counter Catcher. You can also get a tool card as well. It looks like there's no option available, and yet again, targeting Minccino, understanding special role, this deck's biggest threat, cannot be online, or Ian will be in a world of hurt.
We're going to see this knockout, preparing the Pidgeot as well to potentially hunt down the last Minccino. I think Ian knows that the standard to play is a 3-3 line, right? So we shouldn't be seeing more. And we do see the gift energy get activated before we promote. And it's going to be the Lugia, which is now going to hit into the Entei, most likely. Yeah, 1 boss is down, 1 boss and 1 Serena are in the prize card, so 1 way left to Ghost alongside the Prime Catcher.
And yet again, Brandon is down to just over half of his energy cards remaining with what's on the board and what's in the discard pile, and only down to, looks like 1 more copy of that Minccino. Maybe 2 more with how things are going. We'll see the Ultra Ball get played, so Brandon will search through the deck. We'll see what pieces are still available. There's that first Minccino, and it looks like the second Minccino also still waiting in the deck. So we'll see if that is the choice, and it will be. So this will be a big turn to finally get down double Minccino. But then you also ask yourself, do I start to Primal Turbo onto 1? Do I have to commit my energies to both? And then again, the more you sort of split your energies up, the more of an interesting spot you put yourself into.
Yeah, splitting the thing is, like, if you split your energies or you preemptively, if you don't preemptively power up the Minccino, then they can go after an Arceus, and that really limits your energy attachments for turn. But if you do preemptively power up the Minccino, then they go after them, and then they deny those energies anyway. So it's like a lose-lose sort of situation, knowing that you're up against a Pidgeot that can cost pretty much every single turn. But we are now tied in prizes, and I think against control decks, you can expect them to have only 1 copy of Boss's Order, so it's not as easy for them to recycle it over and over and over.
So this is the decision for Brandon. Has burnt a lot of these special energy cards that are not Jet Energy and Double Turbo. Saving that Jet Energy, we saw how valuable it was. That Jet Energy was still in the deck at the end of the turn there for Brandon. looks like considering just putting on that gift energy, maybe just not using the other Primal Turbo just yet. We do still know that Professor's Research is in the hand. There was that copy of Double Turbo Energy, which was played down for the turn onto that Minccino. As it stands right now, unless Brandon wants to commit another Boss's Orders, we'll just be forced to hit into this Entei for not enough damage. 10 damage short, doing 220, and Ian is still in a great spot so far. Tied on prizes, but still having Pidgeot out every turn, clearing a lot of these energies. And as it stands now, this could even be an opportunity where Ian is maybe okay to give up these 2 prizes if it means clearing that Minccino off the board. This is going to be a big decision for him this turn.
Yeah, clearing the Minccino this turn, that will allow the Entei to go down, and then Radiant Charizard is a big threat. And I do believe Ian will have access to Defiance Vest, or Defiance Band, sorry, by that point. So he will be able to be ahead. He will be 1 prize behind, take this knockout on the Lugia, put himself at 1 prize card remaining, and that should be simple enough to accomplish with the Thornton play that we saw, along with Magma Basin.
So, looks like there's just a few cards left in the hand for Brandon, as Ian will find Luminion off the Ultra Ball, and just going to do some sequencing here. Not using that Luminous Sign yet, can use the Fleet-footed ability to just draw a card before seeing some pieces. So we'll see 1 more card put to the hand. And now the question for Ian, what does he want to do this turn? Is there going to just be a supporter used so far? That's in the hand. Will Luminion come down? We saw that it was a liability in that first game. So Sui and Heavy Ball will get the Mawile out of the prizes if Ian wants that as an option. Though knowing that Prime Catcher is in the deck for Brandon makes Tempting Trap a lot less of a tempting play for Ian.
Less tempting indeed, Ethan. Now, enough energies available to distribute amongst your attackers, but not to cover everything, right? So you could try and trap something, and then they dedicate energies, attack with it, and you trap something else, and eventually run them out of energy that way, but not choosing to grab the Mawile anyways. We are seeing a retreat here from the Entei.
I think the consideration is if you retreat this Entei and then boss up the Minccino and knock it out with Pidgeot, you then force your opponent to play their last 2 Boss's Orders to be able to knock out Entei, or something like Serena. We do know that is up in the top of the prize cards. Otherwise, you can maybe just use this Pidgeot once, and then no matter how much damage it sinks, or rather it takes in, you kind of just only use it for support from there on out. It's going to maybe burn your opponent of as many resources, and we're just going to see Boss's Orders. And now this is the question for Ian. Do you just accept this Entei V is going to go down at this point, or do you try and protect it for as long as possible and pay that hefty 3 retreat cost to go into that Pidgeot EX and use that as your attacker this turn?
I mean, if this was a Game 1 situation, I think retreating would make more sense, but because you're in Game 2, I think you really want the Entei to go down so that you can use Radiant Charizard with the Defiance Vest. I think that will be the key to this match in particular, as we do see the knockout finally. Going down to 3 prizes, Brandon will be able to respond here if he chooses to do so, right? He might also recognize that the Radiant Charizard is coming, and he didn't see Defiance Band last time, but that's something that someone as prepared as Brandon at the very top of the tables at the regional tournament probably knows, even though he hasn't seen it.
You got to have some sort of understanding of how these decks are built. It's a key thing to keep in the back of your mind. Always got to ask yourself, how am I able to lose games, not just how am I trying to win games? And there it is, the last Minccino coming down into play, playing that full 4-3 line. And here we go, Primal Turbo getting things kicked off as well. And it looks like it may just be all in onto this final Minccino. Or does Brandon want to save these Jet Energies? Still has all 4 Jet Energies remaining in the deck. Has gone out of his way to make sure those energies have not been put into Pokemon and that they can be kept to be attached for turn. And Brandon's still doing that, keeping all 4 available as options. Just going to get only the double Turbo Energy onto that Minccino.
Yeah, really respecting the possibility of Mawile, really respecting the possibility of Snorlax as well. But yeah, I really think never having 2 Minccinos down at once was one of the issues that might cost Brandon in this particular game, because he was never able to respond effectively to this Entei. He had to do this 2-hit KO play. Now he's going to leave himself open to the Radiant Charizard. Ian will have the advantage here, and with the Thornton or with Superrod, Ian should be able to close this out before time is up.
It's just going to be Jock searching out 2 Archeops. Brandon just sort of thinning the hand, or rather thinning the deck out, finding pieces that he may not want. Could be seeing a repeat of game number 1, where a late game Iono can provide a lot of value if you're not knocking out Pokemon that have gift energy. And here we go. Brandon Baughn taking the knockout, going down to just 2 prize cards, and that's so heartbreaking that 2 gusting cards are still remaining as your last 2 prize cards. That could be a big factor in whether or not Brandon has enough gas in the tank to get across the finish line.
Yeah, I mean, with 6 energies, if he dedicated all the jet energies and evolved this in Chino, if he had the boss's orders, would that be enough to KO the Pidgeot? I think it would be, right?
6 energies, 420 minus the 40 from double turbo energy. That's exactly
enough. But there's one way, right? There's still Prime Catcher as well, but you have to expect an Iono is coming with this knockout, and we're still missing the Cinccino. So Cinccino plus Prime Catcher, I mean, we saw Brandon do it the previous game, right? The 2 perfect cards, but can he do it back-to-back games? Odds are stacked against him.
And let's not forget that Ian is behind on prize cards and just going to play the boss's orders this turn, bringing up that Minccino, and now all 4 Minccino have been knocked out, and Ian will go down to 2 prize cards, but does put this Radiant Charizard in the active spot. So now Brandon, with having 4 energy cards left in the deck, has to think about what attackers he wants to use, and smartly will bring up this Snorlax into the active spot, since I think he understands in the back of his mind, Defiance Band, a really scary card, especially with Charizard, still being able to, with a combination of cards, of course, come back into play.
Now there are only jet energies available here, and Snorlax is going to need 3. Yeah, and that's going to leave 1 left, so now that could open up the possibility to trap an Arceus or something for a little bit, right? Even if you don't have the Snorlax, you could start using Chi-Yu aggressively as well. Now, did see Capturing Aroma, Tails Flip, that grabs the Luminion, could potentially grab the boss, just not quite this turn. So now we're going to see the Primal Turbo, Snorlax going to get powered up, Charizard's going to go down, but we also have to factor in the 2 coin flips for Snorlax to wake up.
This is going to be a big time play here from Brandon. And also, the fact that he's going to take this knockout means that he'll draw into a guaranteed gusting card, but it really is going to depend which one. That's Serena, since there are no V Pokemon on the bench, could cause an issue. And Brandon actually has the Therapy Energy. It does not draw into the boss, draws into Serena. Brandon now knows that boss's orders is the last prize card remaining. Could shift the entire dynamic of this game, but let's not count Ian out left. Counter Catcher back online. That Radiant Charizard is in the discard pile, but there is a combination of cards potentially here for Ian. You see him adjusting in his chair a little bit, getting prepared, thinking to himself, is it possible? You would need a way to bring this Charizard back. You need something like an energy card or a Magma Basin, and then that Defiance Band plus a Counter Catcher or boss's orders. Maybe this is a turn where Ian may have to just take things a little bit slower, but you saw how that approach worked in game 1. 1 extra turn there for Brandon was all he needed to find those last pieces to close the game out.
And now I know I remember seeing 1 boss's orders played, but is there still 1 boss's orders available? We know the Prime Catcher is also available though, so that is an option. Now we did see Ian burn a Nest Ball a few turns ago, right? Which is how he could now find that Radiant Charizard. So you gotta wonder if that could be costly for Ian at this point in time.
Trade off in the moment for a little bit weaker of a play later on. I think Ian may just be 1 card short and is gonna have to just go for the Iono to 1 card. Ian only drawing 2, now has not used Quick Search yet, so here is going to be a very interesting spot. What does Ian want to do here? Has access to Quick Search. What card does he want to find off of this Quick Search? Do we see the Charizard get preemptively grabbed and then wait for the following turn to maybe let this Pidgeot tank a hit? You can't retreat into any of these Pokemon because the Snorlax gets through them all. And then additionally, Lugia V-Star can knock out anything. Even if you try and put something like a Bravery Charm on it, that Snorlax, or rather the Lugia V-Star, can still knock a Pokemon out. So we're going to see Charizard come down, and here it is. Blustery Wind, 100 damage. Brandon, you did the incredible in game 1 with just 1 card. What can you put together with a 2-card hit? And has the Prime Catcher off the Iono to 1. Brandon closing things out. What a draw. Advancing to 12-0-1, and will be 1 step closer to top 8. Iono, it's a lie, Pablo. It's not real. Brandon may just be Iono's best friend because she came through and found him everything he needed in that set.
I don't know if Prime Catcher was the top deck or the one card, but either way, what a way to close this one out. And mad props to Ian. He played his heart out, and it was generally a very impressive display of Snorlax control against possibly one of the worst, if not the worst matchup that Pidgeot Control has. What a display, and Ian was so close, especially on that first game. That Chi-Yu almost seemed to work against him at that point in time.
It was so close. It seemed like he was just there, but just again, sometimes with those late hand disruptions, you kind of put yourself in a spot where statistically, like you said, 9 out of 10, 80% of games, you're going to win those because you're going to get discarded more pieces than your opponent's going to be able to draw into. But not only was that boss discarded, but the other piece was in the hand, so it couldn't have been discarded. And because the Jet Energy was the next card instead of the previous to get discarded, Ian Robb fell just short in that first game, and then game 2 as well. So close. Ian missing those early attachments. It was still a very solid start there for Brandon. It was really a great set to look back on, and this is a great set for anybody watching who says, yeah, control is great, but Lugia, you just cannot beat it. Ian is proving that even if matchups are tough, he's going to do everything in his power to show that he has lines, and he's going to make the best plays he can. That is truly veteran, experienced players doing what they do best in the game.
Yeah, and it's funny to call Ian a veteran because he's like 23, 22 years old, maybe 20, like I'm not sure, but he's incredibly young, but his experience, his skill, it was on full display here. No wonder he has won so many regional championships, and this doesn't put Ian out of contention, right? Still 2 more rounds to go. He can still make it all the way to the top, and I would not be surprised if that happened, because what a display. He systematically took down all the Minchinos, the big threats. Brandon was not able to bench 2 at once. Ian recognized that those were the threats and almost pulled it off.
Yeah, what a statement that would be, making back-to-back top cuts now that at regional championships, now that these regionals are 2,000 plus players, that shows a level of consistency. We gotta still give credit to Brandon though. Even some small decisions like targeting that Pidgey, that game could be completely different there. If that Pidgey evolves into another Pidgeot, maybe it soaks up another hit, maybe one of these Pokemon isn't benched, and yeah, you've gotta think back to that moment there for Ian. If he maybe had that Nest Ball still available, could have maybe just been one piece short, assuming that Defiance Band was still in the deck, which I believe he took it off the prizes earlier on. Was just falling oh so short. We'll see here if it was. It was the top deck. That is insane. What a top deck there for Brandon. And you see him giving a sigh of relief, looking at the crowd showing, yeah, you know what? That may have been a little improbable, but I just did that. I put myself now in a spot where Brandon has 37 match points.
Yeah.
He is locked for top cut. He is our first player here in LA who is guaranteed to be in the top 8. Pablo, who could have predicted Lugia as the highest ranking player potentially going into this final bracket?
I mean, certainly not me. I feel like I've been very outspoken about this. Lugia has felt like a little bit of a lie, but turns out when the tournament is full of control, that's the perfect storm brewing for Lugia to do well. I know there's a few others that are doing well out there at the top table, so it might be Lugia that closes out this format before we jump into Twilight Masquerade.
Yeah, of course, we're keeping action updated with all the matches going outside. In fact, we're down to just our final 2 rounds. So Brandon sitting at an undefeated 12-0-1 record. He's playing up at table 1 against Baughn Ahmed, and that's another control. So Pablo, we don't talk about this a lot.